The surprising escape from my daughter's home after discovering an incredible plan. Jim sat at the old wooden dining table, an all-too-familiar sanctuary where laughter and learning had intertwined with memories of his late wife. But tonight, shadows loomed over the comforting wood grain. His hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the neatly organized papers he had found hidden beneath a stack of Emily's textbooks, scrutinizing every detail of her ambitious plan, a plan that involved leaving their cozy suburban town for a prestigious internship. The air was heavy with the scent of the dinner he'd prepared, but Jim's appetite had vanished. A storm brewed inside him as he battled conflicting feelings. Wasn't it his duty to support her ambitions? He had dedicated nearly 2 decades to raising her after her mother's illness took her too soon. Yet the thought of losing the closeness they had forged sent icy tendrils of betrayal snaking through his heart. His daughter was growing, becoming a woman ready to shape her destiny, and yet it felt like a dagger to his chest. Betrayal simmered alongside pride and fear. He envisioned her success, but at what cost? The memories cried out from deep within him, demanding to be acknowledged. Sacrifices made and promises sworn to a woman he had loved fiercely. Was it right to keep her close if it meant stifling her dreams? The question clawed at him, relentless and suffocating. As dinner unfolded, Jim's mind raced. He had poured everything into Emily, shaping her into the person he believed she should be. But was that her path or his? Uncertainty gripped him. He set down his fork, his heart pounding, questioning his ability to be both a father and enabler of a future he feared would look nothing like what they had built together. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The tension thickened in the space between them after he placed the papers on the table, his voice trembling. "Emily, we need to talk about this." Anger sparked in her eyes, a vivid mirror reflecting his own turmoil. The dinner table, once a place for solace and love, transformed into a battleground. A heated argument ignited, old wounds surfacing like forgotten phantoms, exposing family secrets that had lingered unsaid. His late wife's dreams emerged from the shadows, entwining with Jim's burdens, rising to the surface of this emotional melee. Jim felt the ache of loss surging, the anguish growing more potent as Emily insisted on pursuing her. She stood on the precipice of a bright future, and yet he felt himself teetering on the edge of despair, choking on the unresolved grief of her mother's absence. Could he truly let her go? Or would his desperation seep into her determination, drowning her ambitions? Caught in this charged silence, the weight of their uncommunicated fears settled heavily between them. Just as he readied himself to embrace understanding, the doorbell rang, an unexpected interruption slicing through their fragile moment. Jim and Emily locked eyes, uncertainty mirrored in their expressions, as they both realized their gripping confrontation was far from over. Who stood beyond the door, and how would this unforeseen visitor ripple through the tempest brewing around their futures? Jim's heart raced as he exchanged glances with Emily, both of them paralyzed by the unexpected shift in their tumultuous conversation. The doorbell reverberated like a judge's gavel, a harbinger of change that neither had anticipated. Emily's expression morphed from anger to confusion, her fight momentarily suspended as a new layer of tension unfolded. "Should you get that?" she asked, skepticism lacing her voice. With a heavy sigh, he stood up, his resolve still quaking beneath the weight of their discussion. Was this visitor a distraction from their confrontation or a catalyst for greater emotional turmoil? He moved mechanically towards the door, pondering what awaited him on the threshold. As he opened the door, surprise flickered in his eyes. A former colleague from his old advertising firm, Mark. The man's buoyant energy stood in stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere inside the house. "Jim, long time no see. Mind if I pop in?" he boomed, oblivious to the storm brewing inside. Jim hesitated, glancing back at Emily and seeing the tension still written across her features. Yet something within him stirred. Perhaps he could use an ally. "Sure, come on in," he replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Mark stepped inside, filling the entrance with his jovial presence, but he paused as he noticed the atmosphere shift. "Whoa, what's going on? You two look like you've just survived a hurricane." Jim took a deep breath, feeling the urge to protect Emily from yet another conversation about her future. "Just some family matters, nothing I can't handle," he replied, but Mark's raised brow indicated his concern. "Family can be complicated, huh?" Mark said, settling into a chair and leaning forward, his expression softening. "You know, I've been meaning to catch up with you, Jim. I heard you've been focused on Emily. She's your world, right?" As Mark spoke, Jim's internal conflict bubbled to the surface. The words felt heavy, almost painful, reverberating with Jim's insecurities about his parenting choices. He knew he'd poured every ounce of himself into Emily, but at what cost? He sensed an emerging clarity in this unexpected conversation. Would opening up offer him a new perspective, perhaps a path forward in his relationship with Emily? "Yeah, I've always tried to be there for her, Jim began, cautiously. "But now it feels like shadows from the past are creeping into my ability to support her." Mark studied him intently. "Her ambitions, I take it? It can be tough to let go, especially with everything you've been through. But just remember, growth sometimes comes from letting go." The words struck a chord in Jim. Growth. Was this what he was struggling against? A fear of growth? Her growth, or even his own, manifesting as a desperate need to cling to the life he built around her late mother. Did he need to shift from protector to ally? And could he embrace that without losing himself in the process? As the conversation deepened, Jim began to realize how rigidly he had defined parenthood. The holidays spent together, every learning moment shared, those were meant to be the foundation, not a cage. But how could he support her aspirations while confronting his fears? Emily, who had remained quiet, suddenly interjected, her voice steady. "Maybe I'm ready to step into the world, Dad, but I don't understand why you can't see that, not just for me, but for yourself." Her words hung in the air, each syllable laden with the very essence of his turmoil. The unopened Pandora's box lay there, rippling, ready to burst. Jim's mind raced, understanding that this moment had the potential to shatter the boundaries of their relationship, setting them free from long-held constraints. But with every gain, there was loss, and that uncertainty loomed like a heavy cloud. And then came the sharp reminder that the door once again stood ajar, revealing unseen possibilities. Would he allow the winds of change to sweep through, or would fear hold him captive once more? The answer weighed heavily on him. With the clarity that dawned amidst the emotional fog, the time had come for a reckoning. As silence enveloped them, a new resolution began forging within him. But first, would he step through that door with Emily and face the unknown together, or remain shackled to the past? The clock ticked ominously, whispering the urgency of decisions yet to be made. Jim stood quietly, the tension tugging at the edges of his resolve. Emily's words echoed loudly in his mind, mingling with the weight of Mark's supportive presence. Suddenly, the door seemed less like a barrier and more like a threshold to a less encumbered understanding. But could he really face the unknown? "Maybe you're right," he said slowly, a new warmth creeping into his tone as he considered Emily's challenge. "Maybe it is time for both of us to move forward." The words felt foreign and exhilarating, unfolding potential even he hadn't fully recognized. Mark leaned back in his chair, a grin of encouragement spreading across his face. "That's the spirit, Jim. Change can be a powerful thing, both for you and for Emily." His enthusiasm was a stark contrast to the emotional quagmire that Jim had waded through for so long. But beneath this fresh momentum, Jim grappled with deep-seated fears. What if Emily failed? What if in encouraging her independence, he pushed her away? Devoid of the crutch of his well-practiced protectiveness, was he prepared to take such a risk? Emily's gaze challenged him again, her golden brown eyes glistening with unspoken hopes. "Dad, there's so much out there waiting for me. I just need you to trust me." The juvenile defiance he had grown accustomed to had transformed into a plea for partnership. It was a plea he desperately wanted to answer, yet the question loomed. Did he trust himself to relinquish control? Taking a steadying breath, Jim moved closer to Emily, creating an invisible bridge between them. "Let's talk about what you want and how I can help you get there. No reservations, just honesty." Mark shot him a thumbs up, the man's optimism only serving to amplify the resolve stamped across Jim's face. For Jim, it was a declaration of sorts. He was choosing to evolve, not just for Emily, but for himself as well. As they settled into a conversation that mattered, Jim started to ask questions he had shied away from before. He discovered Emily's interest in environmental studies, a field full of promise and urgency. She shared her dream of changing the world, one community at a time. The details spilled forth like sparkling jewels. The more he learned, the more invigorated he felt. He had never imagined the depth of her ambitions. But the radiant passion he witnessed illuminated another concern: the sacrifices she might need to make. "What about college? Have you thought about how you're going to balance everything?" he asked, protective instincts whispering in his ear. "I want to go to a school where I can make a difference, Dad. One where I can meet others who think like me. I can't do that if I'm bound to something that doesn't let my voice be heard." There it was, the pulse of determination vibrating in the air between them. A wave of understanding washed over Jim as he realized that her bravery mirrored what he too needed to find within himself. As the evening stretched on, they delved deep into the realities of college applications and scholarships. The prospect excited him. This was their first collaborative venture toward the future, a shared construction site for dreams. Yet still, the specter of loss haunted him. Moments from their past that were too precious to forget, yet felt weighty in the face of what was to come. "Are you ready for this? I mean, truly ready?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. Emily nodded, her seriousness grounding him. "I am, but I need you to be all in too, Dad. It's not just about me stepping out, it's about both of us letting go of old fears together." Perhaps this was the turning point Jim needed, a calling to step into the same uncharted territory he'd been so afraid of. He clenched his fists, feeling a newfound determination push through the veins that had long been stagnant with worry. As they continued to discuss strategies, the clock's ticking morphed into a metronome guiding their journey toward change, marking expiration on their former habits. And just as Jim felt a flicker of hope igniting possibilities, Mark interjected with an unexpected question. "What if you applied to work with an agency that sparks your creativity? You know, take a leap of faith yourself." The suggestion sent a jolt through Jim, awakening a dormant aspiration that had long stagnated alongside his daughter's growth. He had been so focused on her dreams that he lost touch with his own. Could he really chase that path, right alongside Emily, forging their future in tandem? And what about all those long-buried ambitions waiting impatiently for him to resurrect them? As he pondered this monumental shift, the echo of a long-forgotten dream ignited within him, setting the stage not only for Emily's emergence, but for his own rediscovery as well. The future loomed large, tantalizing in its uncertainty, yet electric with promise, both for him and her. And yet the question lingered. Would he have the courage to take that leap, to wrestle with his fears, and reignite the aspirations that had laid dormant for so long? As Jim sat there, the flicker of possibility bathed in the light of a realization, he felt an energy stirring within him. The unfamiliar sensation was a blend of apprehension and excitement, pulling him towards an opportunity he had neglected for too long, his own identity outside of fatherhood. Mark's proposition rattled in his mind, a dynamic clash against the stillness he'd settled into over the years. The thought of working with a creative agency felt like a whisper from a past self, the Jim who once dreamed of storytelling and innovation. The very idea seemed improbable, yet alluring, and it prompted a cascade of questions that unraveled his current reality. Would he be able to meet the demands of such a fast-paced environment? Would he have the stamina to rise early, stay late, and immerse himself in the world of ideas? The very notion of pursuing a career ignited a fire in his chest. He began to picture late nights spent brainstorming, the thrill of collaboration, the satisfaction that his contributions might influence others. Then came the doubt, mounting like a weight heavy on his shoulders. After all these years, was he equipped to reintegrate into such a landscape? The insecurities that had once buoyed him seemed to surge forward, urging him to retreat into the cocoon of familiarity he had woven around himself. Trying to disentangle himself from those threads felt both liberating and daunting. His attention shifted back to Emily, whose gaze now sparkled with a mix of hope and anticipation. It was clear she envisioned a future that transcended their past. At that moment, the realization struck him. He couldn't hold her back and simultaneously step into his own unknown. "Mark, I think I could use some guidance, maybe even mentorship. But what about the responsibilities I've carried for so long?" The uncertainty could be heard in his voice, but there was a profound yearning for change simmering beneath. "Responsibilities will always be there, Jim," Mark replied confidently, "but they don't have to weigh you down. You have a lot to offer, not just to Emily, but to the world. It's time for you to reflect that within your work, too." These words echoed in Jim's mind, chipping away at his fortress of self-doubt. If he were to rise, to discover what lay outside of his careful constructs, he would need to divide his focus, but also forge a new path for himself. A wave of resolve washed over him as he envisioned the potential ramifications of his choices. By stepping forward, he would demonstrate true courage, not just for his daughter's benefit, but as a testament to his own journey of rediscovery. Emily leaned in closer, sensing the shift in energy around him. "Dad, whatever you choose, I'll support you. Just think of all the possibilities. You can be my role model just as much as I want to be yours." Her words resonated with him. The idea that a generational exchange could occur, where both father and daughter would empower one another, served as a beautiful motivation as well as a challenge. Jim straightened, letting his chair echo the decisive adjustment within him. "You know what? I believe it's time to seriously explore that agency. Let's figure out a plan." With her excited nod, he felt a surge of adrenaline course through him, each heartbeat reinforcing his commitment to pursue the unknowing future. As they drafted ideas together, he began to articulate what he could bring to the table, merging his past experiences with his present aspirations. Each suggestion, each line of thought seemed laced with intention, breathing life into both his and Emily's ambitions. He was part of a collaborative effort now, and the thrill of planning alongside her felt like a tangible connection, a reassurance that they were both emerging from past shadows, ready to embrace fluctuating futures. Yet the undercurrent of his internal conflict remained. The evening stretched on, and as they compiled a list of prospects for his potential agency career, Jim felt exhilaration twined with doubt. Each idea sparked resolve, yet a nagging sense of fear whispered in the back of his mind, warning him of how easy it would be to backtrack. In the sudden silence of the room, filled with hopes and plans, Jim whispered to himself, "What if I don't just influence my daughter's future, but rediscover my own in the process?" This awakening spurred a quiet urgency. The realization of matching Emily's boldness unraveled something profound inside him. He had begun to envision an unfamiliar life, one that might fulfill the creative ambitions he had previously shielded from view. But with the dawn of this new chapter, Jim felt the shadows shifting again. What challenges lay in wait? What unexpected turns his journey take? As the weight of those thoughts settled in, he couldn't shake that unresolved feeling. Would he truly embrace the collaborative creative push they were drafting? Or would fear overshadow ambition once again? The following weeks unfolded like a hazy dream, punctuated by moments of clarity and uncertainty. Jim plunged into researching the creative industry while balancing his responsibilities at home. Days merged into nights as he sifted through online resources, soaking in insights on advertising strategies and storytelling techniques. The buzz of design software and marketing buzzwords became a familiar cacophony around him. Each new piece of knowledge ignited a latent creativity he hadn't tapped into for years. But even as Jim leaned into this newfound zeal, the shadows of doubt continued to whisper in the corners of his mind. He built spreadsheets lined with visions of his contributions, potential campaigns that resonated with values he cared about, yet those spreadsheets often felt like fragile constructs on the verge of collapse. What if this was just another temporary fixation, a misguided escape from reality? Jim took to meeting with Mark more regularly. Their conversations felt electric, ideas bouncing off one another like static energy. Mark, with his enthusiastic encouragement, was skilled at laying out frameworks for campaign pitches, and Jim found himself revitalized in the role of creative contributor. He had begun to present his ideas for projects he'd love to bring to life: a children's book based on his and Emily's adventures, a unique marketing campaign that involved storytelling through community experiences. Each idea anchored him to a purpose beyond parental duties. Yet shadow doubts often crept back. With each passing week, Jim wrestled with the fear that perhaps he wasn't truly built for this fast-paced world. The agency's brighter lights beckoned, but the specter of his old life loomed behind him, reminding him of the comfort he once sought. He grappled with the cruel irony that pursuing his passion felt like a betrayal to the stability he'd constructed for Emily. "Dad, you seem more alive lately," Emily remarked one evening, her insights catching him off guard. She had witnessed the fumbled attempts at balancing work, research, and family time, yet he hadn't realized it was visible. Did she see the confusion dancing alongside his enthusiasm? As they prepared dinner together, chopping vegetables side by side, he finally mustered the courage to express his ambivalence. "I'm trying, Emily, but sometimes I feel like I'm walking a tightrope between pursuing my dreams and being there for you. What if I fail at both?" Emily looked up, her brow furrowed in contemplation. "You won't, Dad. You're doing this for both of us. Think of it as a journey we can share. Besides, every time you try something, you're showing me what it means to take a risk. Isn't that part of being a role model?" Her conviction jolted him. It was one thing to spark ideas, but another entirely to accept that his daughter was learning from his struggles. His rediscovery of self was igniting something within her, too. Perhaps his fear of failure was a necessary part of the adventure. Days turned into weeks, and one Friday, Mark asked Jim to present his ideas at an upcoming brainstorming session at the agency. The thrill that coursed through him was nearly as intoxicating as the fear that gripped his throat. Would he measure up against others? What if his contributions floundered amidst seasoned professionals? He spent endless hours preparing, storyboarding his ideas, mapping them with digital tools, rehearsing out loud in an empty kitchen. Yet, when the moment arrived, a jarring mix of excitement and trepidation washed over him as he stepped into the bustling agency. The atmosphere inside was electric. The buzz of conversations and laughter punctuated the air, filled with creativity. As he introduced himself to the team, Jim felt an unfamiliar blend of being an outsider and a hopeful contender. He had spent years crafting a version of himself rooted in domesticity. Now he was stoking the flames of possibility. As he laid out his vision, gauging expressions around the table and trying to project confidence he didn't entirely feel, something remarkable happened. His ideas were met with intrigue. People were nodding, engaging. He was actively contributing to a narrative larger than himself, igniting responses from listeners with their own perspectives. Yet, in a moment rife with enthusiasm, a critical voice overpowered the rest. "But Jim, tell us, what are you bringing that's different from what we already have?" That voice pierced through his bravado, threatening to shatter the confidence he had built up to that moment. Would he find an answer amidst the weight of that question? Now the stakes had escalated. This wasn't merely about him anymore, but a test of whether he could embrace vulnerability in pursuit of his renewal. Would he stand firm in the knowledge that his perspective might be his greatest asset? The moment defined a key crossroads he hadn't anticipated. As the room waited quietly, anticipating his response, Jim felt the rush of possibility colliding with fear. Suddenly, it wasn't merely a presentation, it was his own transformation on display. Would he courageously expose that thread of creativity woven from parental love? Or would he falter in the face of scrutiny? His heartbeat quickened. What direction would his answer take? Validate or pivot completely away from his journey? The pressure in the room was palpable, and with every inch closer to his answer, Jim could almost hear his heartbeat echoing through the silence. The critical question reverberated in his mind like an unyielding drum. What differentiated his ideas from the scores of campaigns already crafted by established professionals? He inhaled sharply, tasting the lingering remnants of self-doubt like stale air. Jim's mind raced through a flurry of thoughts. Could he cite clever techniques, draw from industry honorees? But then another thought broke through. His ideas were rooted in authenticity, woven from his experiences as a father and a creative thinker. Something no one else could replicate. "Perhaps what I'm bringing is a unique perspective built from my life experiences," Jim finally said, steadying his voice with a newfound resolve. "As a father, I've witnessed the power of stories in teaching and engaging children. For instance, my pitch isn't just about marketing a product, but bringing to life the lessons children learn through adventures, something genuinely relatable." He felt the room shift as he spoke, their gazes sharpening with interest. Validating his own narrative lifted an unexpected weight off his shoulders. He was not merely a contributor, he was a storyteller with purpose. Jim noticed Mark nodding, a supportive grin easing some tension within him. Could it be? The essence of his ideas resonated beyond traditional advertising. They touched on nuance, relatability, and if storytelling was this powerful, what if it could be harnessed in ways he hadn't even explored yet? The initial critical voice, however, persisted. "That's nice, Jim, but how will you translate those emotional connections into actionable results? We need metrics, ROI. That question cut through him again. He was no longer in the sheltered comfort of making spreadsheets, breathing life into creative visions, though. He was now required to balance emotion with analytical rigor. The fear of inadequacy threatened to resurface, but he anchored himself to the conviction that launched him into this arena. What if we view metrics not just through the lens of immediate sales, but as a reflection of consumer loyalty? Jim offered, attempting to pair his narrative with a definitive angle. Capturing genuine engagement means nurturing a connection that extends beyond the sale, fostering a community that shares those stories through generations. What he saw next was remarkable. Curiosity flickered in the eyes of the team. His vulnerability and insistence on melding creativity with analytics struck a chord. A few team members began to discuss the potential longevity of relationships forged through meaningful narratives. With this flowing momentum, Jim felt an invigorating surge of enthusiasm. Could he really be contributing something fresh? The realization dawned. This was not just about impressing others. It was about forging a path for himself and others like him, sharing insights that could transform mundane narratives. By the end of the session, Jim sensed the walls around him softening. It wasn't just a proposal anymore. It was an invitation to everyone in the room to consider a different narrative, one where creativity could coexist with performance and profitability. As the meeting concluded and casual conversations resumed, Jim knew the hard work had just begun. He had successfully glimpsed keen acceptance, but would still need to navigate the complexities of delivering tangible results while remaining true to his newfound identity. That night, as he returned home to an unassuming kitchen filled with the warmth of family, his conversations with Emily resounded in his ears. She had sparked something profound within him, a call to take risks for the sake of growth. He realized he wouldn't simply be paving a path for himself, he was carving a legacy for her. He embodied the role of both creator and caretaker, harmonizing the two? But along with anticipation came the undeniable awareness he was still navigating unexplored terrain. Jim stared at the unknown ahead, knowing it would demand more of him than he had ever offered. The moment he had stepped into that agency had unleashed a torrent of possibilities, and now the challenge loomed. How would he sustain this delicate balance going forward? The air thick with uncertainty, he began crafting his next moves, his heart pounding in sync with the realization that the journey was only beginning. What road would he choose amidst the challenges ahead? And could he protect the blend of passion and responsibility every step of the way? Facing a new day after the meeting, Jim felt an adrenaline rush ripple through him. He awoke not to ordinary routines, but to the thrill of newfound possibilities. The earlier nerves dissipated, replaced by a tinge of excitement. This was his chance to explore the confluence of creativity and metrics, an intersection where he believed he could leave his mark. But that realization came with a heavy burden: how to maintain momentum without sacrificing authenticity. As he settled into his daily work, Jim began building a strategy that emphasized storytelling while ensuring measurable outcomes. He started assembling case studies of brands that successfully integrated relatable narratives with results-oriented campaigns. To his surprise, the research was invigorating, reigniting his passion for both storytelling and analytics. A fire ignited within him, compelling him to connect these dots in a way that had not been attempted before. The walls of his office room seemed to close in on him, but instead of feeling claustrophobic, he felt inspired. This was not just work, it was a mission. He printed out sticky notes with key insights, arranging them into a cohesive tapestry of ideas. Each note represented a piece of the puzzle, a chance to harness his unique voice to create narratives that not only resonate emotionally, but could be tracked for effectiveness. Despite this rush of creativity, shadows of doubt still lingered. How would others react when he pitched this idea? Some might still cling to skepticism. Others might not fully grasp the essence of what he wanted to achieve. The thought of presenting something bold and groundbreaking was daunting, but he didn't want to retreat into the comfortable mold of past approaches. During lunch, while sitting with a few colleagues, he listened intently as they discussed their latest projects. They spoke passionately about technical details and metrics, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something essential missing in their conversations. Their passion was evident, yet their discussions lacked the heart that could carry a campaign beyond merely transactional results. Jim could feel a conviction swelling within him. Have you ever thought about how we connect with consumers on a personal level? It seems like we're often stuck in this cycle of numbers, he interjected carefully. They paused, glancing his way. What if we could create experiences that people not only remember, but want to share? Their initial reactions were mixed, varying from curiosity to confusion. Yet, one colleague, Sarah, leaned forward. I think there's something there, Jim. You might be onto something with emotional engagement. Fueled by Sarah's encouragement, Jim decided he would take the plunge. He formed a plan to present his new framework to the team, blending the narrative structure with forecasts of engagement metrics. The thought both thrilled and scared him. As he polished his presentation the night before, the weight of self-doubt clawed back into his mind. Was he stepping too far outside the lines? A doubt darker than before whispered insistently, what if this was a grand idea without practical application? He couldn't afford to fail, not just for himself, but for Emily, who believed in her dad even when he faltered. Jim took a breath, steadying his mind. He reminded himself that every great achievement started with a risk. He thought of the heartwarming stories he wanted to tell and how they carried both a purpose and a potential to influence the world beyond just transactions. The following morning, as he headed into the meeting, the air was thick with palpable anticipation. He could feel the gravity of the moment hanging heavily over him. Today was pivotal, and the path forward was uncertain. Would he validate his journey, or would the fear of inadequacy swallow him whole? As he stepped into the room, ready to confront their expectations, he couldn't help but wonder, how far would he be willing to go to defend the authenticity of the stories he wanted to tell? Would they embrace his vision, or push him back into the corporate mold he wished to escape? The moment was upon him, and there was no turning back now. As Jim stood before the gathered team, anxiety swirled in him like a storm. The boardroom, a sterile expanse dotted with the familiar faces of his colleagues, suddenly felt alien, a battleground for ideas where only the strongest prevailed. He was acutely aware of the stakes, not just for his career, but for the security of his vision, one that danced on the cusp of validation or ridicule. He adjusted his tie, a mere prop for his often unruly nerves, and drew a deep breath. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice resonant yet quavering slightly. "I want to talk about how we connect with our consumers, not just as numbers, but as human beings." The words danced from his lips, warmed by his conviction. As he unfurled his ideas, Jim could see the expressions of his peers shifting. Some were intrigued, brows furrowed with thought, while others glanced at their notes, uncertainty hanging in the air like a thick fog. With every data point he presented, every story he illustrated, the connection he sought to create became clearer in his own mind, but he sensed skepticism still at play. Imagine a campaign that tells a story, one that allows our audience to see themselves in the narrative. As he spoke, he relied on examples from his research, a perfect blend of emotion and metrics. He illustrated the success of campaigns that triggered psychological engagement, showing not just numbers, but the humanity behind them. Jim's passion for the authentic connection flooded through, and he could almost see the walls beginning to crack. However, as the presentation progressed, the weight of critique loomed larger. In the back of the room, he noticed Greg, the head of analytics, shifting impatiently, his frown deepening with each passing slide. Greg embodied the old guard, the steadfast belief in cold, hard metrics over emotional pulls. Jim's passion for the authentic connection flooded through, and he could almost see the walls beginning to crack. However, as the presentation progressed, the weight of critique loomed larger. In the back of the room, he noticed Greg, the head of analytics, shifting impatiently, his frown deepening with each passing slide. Greg embodied the old guard, the steadfast belief in cold, hard metrics over emotional pulls. Jim could feel the pressure of his peers' scrutiny intensifying. When he concluded, silence followed. For a heartbeat, it felt unbearable, the absence of feedback echoing louder than his hopes. Then Greg spoke, voice slow yet cutting. "While I appreciate your enthusiasm, Jim, how do you justify this approach? Can we really measure emotional engagement? Isn't it subjective?" The confrontation ignited a flicker of doubt deep within Jim. But then he recalled Emily's bright face. "Yes," he replied, leaning into his vulnerability. "It is subjective, but that's where its power lies. If we measure only what's easily quantifiable, we ignore the heart of our audience. Emotional engagement can lead to loyalty, and loyalty is measurable." A murmur rippled through the room, interest peaking among some, yet Greg remained unyielding. The look of condescension etched on his face made Jim question himself. Who was he to challenge the norm? The conversation then veered into a deeper discussion, drawing out questions and concepts Jim had hoped for. Sarah's voice chimed in. She posed a query that opened a fresh avenue. What processes can we put in place to integrate these stories into our metrics? The tide began to turn. Jim could feel the tension listing. As they brainstormed together, ideas flowed, merging storytelling with tangible results. His confidence grew with each suggestion, and the atmosphere shifted into collaboration. This was no longer just his vision, it thrived in the collective mind of the team. But as the meeting wound down, a surprising clarity emerged. Jim had begun something larger than himself. Yet here was this haunting realization. Would this newfound camaraderie last past the boardroom? Would the integration of heart into metrics solidify into practice, or would it become merely another fleeting idea that faded into obscurity? The moment held a weight of potential. If he succeeded in embedding authenticity into their approach, there could be a profound change in their work culture. But what if he failed? Feeling the weight of both their hopes and doubts, Jim knew the time had come to deepen his commitment to this vision. He must prepare for escalation if this vision were to survive. As he stepped out of the meeting room, heart pounding with both exhilaration and uncertainty, Jim felt a strange mix of hope and unease wash over him. What would their next steps look like? More importantly, what sacrifices would he have to make to ensure the authenticity of his stories endured? Would he remain steadfast in pursuing this integration despite potential backlash? A new challenge awaited him, and the thought raced through his mind. How much was he willing to risk to foster authenticity in a space so rigid in its metrics? Jim left the boardroom, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him like an oppressive fog. As he navigated the bustling hallways toward his office, his thoughts churned. Ideas from the meeting echoed, merging with doubts lingering from Greg's skepticism. Each step felt heavy. Each breath tasted like resolve mixed with trepidation. He could lose himself in self-doubt or use this moment to shape his journey. The decision raced through him like wildfire. His office still bore the remnants of half-finished projects and scattered notes. Pulling the door shut, he was enveloped in silence, a sanctuary where he could contemplate. Leaning against the desk, he allowed the quiet to draw a clearer picture of the stakes he faced. This wasn't just about metrics or campaigns. It was about how he wanted to lead, to create an environment where emotional connections could flourish alongside logic. He recalled Sarah's question about integrating stories into their metrics. That had been a turning point, a hint of trust, pushing him toward collaboration. However, to transform those fleeting ideas into actions required clarity. Jim needed a strategy, but more crucially, he needed allies, those who could champion his vision rather than simply follow the established guidelines. This thought ignited a flicker of motivation. He would schedule one-on-one discussions with his colleagues, share his vision, and invite them to contribute their insights. Conversations drew out ideas, but more than that, they built relationships. If Jim wanted to shift the culture, he needed to showcase how these stories could resonate with each individual's work. Feeling a spark of determination, he drew a deep breath and began drafting an outline for an email to his team. He would call for a workshop, a safe space for brainstorming, a collaborative sanctuary where ideas could flourish without the weight of metrics crashing down like a heavy hand. This meeting would be about possibility, a chance to innovate freely, where every story contributed was a piece of their growing collective identity. Yet deep in his mind, a nagging doubt lingered. What if his colleagues took a passive stance and feared stepping outside their comfort zones? Change often met resistance, and this group had grown accustomed to the safety of numbers. He would need to address that fear head-on. Engaging them on both emotional and intellectual levels could form an unbreakable bond. But would he manage to foster that in a culture so heavily tethered to traditional metrics? A flicker of an idea sparked in his mind. Why not showcase real-world examples? There were stories, campaigns that had resonated deeply with audiences. But his approach wouldn't just be retrospective. He could analyze them live as a group, dissecting what made them successful while tying that back to their objectives. It was time to spark genuine interest, to help them see the value of emotional engagement as foundational rather than supplementary. After sending the email, a wave of relief washed over him. Yet he was still aware of the looming mountain before him. Greg's reaction to this initiative would be critical. Would Greg counter with data meant to undermine Jim's vision, or would he shift toward collaboration as Jim hoped? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow through his office window, another thought gripped his mind. He realized his next move went beyond simply aligning his colleagues. It was about finding the courage within himself to embrace this shift, regardless of pushback. Would he be able to stand firm against critics while advocating for the innovative path he envisioned? The tension of that uncertainty followed him into the night, the struggle between fear and aspiration playing across his thoughts. Tomorrow would reveal the reactions, the resistance or support, but today was about seizing this moment. A new chapter began. And as he prepared to leave the office, one clear question consumed him. How would he handle the inevitable confrontation with Greg when it arose? The moment of truth loomed, and he braced himself for the challenges that lay ahead. With a new day dawning, Jim stepped into the office, carrying with him a palpable sense of purpose. The underlying anxieties from yesterday's confrontation lingered like an ominous cloud, yet an ember of determination glowed brighter within him. He resolved not to let the weight of uncertainty undermine the path he was forging for himself, nor would he allow others' skepticism to deter him from openly pursuing authenticity. Pacing in front of his computer, he went through his mental notes. The workshop he planned aimed to nurture a culture of shared vulnerability, a chance for collaboration that could weave stories into the fabric of their work. It wouldn't simply be an intellectual exercise. It would be a declaration of intent for a new direction. As his colleagues began trickling in, he could feel anticipation thrumming through the air, and though excitement tinged with nervousness coursed through him, he was ready. His colleagues settled into their chairs, curiosity visibly flickering across their faces. The conference room buzzed with low conversation, and Jem sensed palpable hesitations mixed with muted eagerness. Today was the day for transformation. "Thank you all for joining me for this workshop," he began, his voice steady yet warm. "We're here to explore how we can integrate emotional narratives into our marketing strategies, and why those stories matter more than ever." The initial murmurs faded, eyes shifting towards him, attentively taking in his words. He shared real-world examples of successful campaigns driven by emotional resonance. As he pulled up the slides illustrating the connection between brands and their consumers, Jim urged them to consider not just the metrics, but the humanity behind the numbers. What if we could create a narrative that not only sells, but also engenders loyalty, he proposed, excitement surging within him as he visualized this new culture taking root. As he opened the floor for discussion, hesitant hands rose, inviting the contribution of ideas. One by one, his colleagues chipped in, recounting stories of campaigns that had previously ignited their passions. Sarah spoke first, her voice rich with enthusiasm. "I think the way we can weave real-life stories around our products could shift public perceptions immensely." A wave of collaboration washed over the group. Ideas bounced from person to person, each contributing to the growing narrative tapestry. Jim felt the tide steadily turning from doubt towards a vibrant collective voice. But an underlying tension remained. He could sense Greg's energy shifting, his arms crossed tightly across his chest, brows furrowed with skepticism. Finally, he picked a moment to interject. "Listen, I appreciate the passion here," Greg said, his tone firm with a hint of challenge. "But how do we measure this emotional connection? We can't afford to ignore numbers and metrics. We'd be flying blind." As the tension in the room grew thicker, Jim squared his shoulders. "You're absolutely right, Greg, but what if we approach it differently? What if we gauge emotional engagement through surveys after campaigns? or analyze customer retention post-launch. Metrics don't have to negate creativity, they can complement and enhance it. The room suddenly erupted in discussions about potential frameworks that could track emotional engagement, leaving Greg momentarily speechless, the gears in his mind visibly churning. Jim could see the moment spark something in his colleagues, encouraging them to embrace collaboration over confrontation. By the time the workshop ended, a newfound camaraderie threaded through the room. Each team member felt more invested in the vision they were crafting together. Jim had taken a significant step forward, leading not just an initiative, but embodying the change he wished to see, solidifying his place as a role model in both his workplace and his home. Returning home later that evening, he took a deep breath, allowing the warmth of transformation to envelop him. Emily was already at the table, combing through her college applications. He approached her, a proud smile breaking through the long day. "Today was a turning point, Em," he said, embracing her in a hug that marked an important acknowledgement of their mutual journeys. "We've started a movement towards storytelling that I believe can change everything." Her eyes widened. "That's amazing, Dad! I knew you had it in you." In that moment, Jim felt an undeniable surge of fulfillment. He not only proved to himself that vulnerability led to strength, but also set an example for Emily to pursue her own ambitions fearlessly. The weight of expectation he'd carried for so long melted away, replaced by a solid confidence that he could pave a new path without sacrificing the cherished closeness with his daughter. That night, he reveled in the realization that his contributions, his unique perspective having grown from being a father, had the power to create genuine engagement, not just in the corporate world, but within his home. By championing storytelling, he had transformed the narrative of his life, seamlessly allowing a once fragmented path of fatherhood and personal pursuit to converge with purpose. Indeed, Jim had earned his place in both his professional arena and the hearts of those he loved, marking a profound personal achievement not merely on paper, but in his entire being. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a new light over tomorrow's possibilities, he knew that this moment of synergy between creativity, family, and self-discovery would resonate well beyond anything he could have imagined. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Seriously, it makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to show your support now, because only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of these actions. Don't wait even one more second to share.